Thanks for bearing with us.
All right, hello everybody. I am Jesse Katz, and this is Kate. We're here with Maitri, and to clear up just one point, we appreciate the intro, and it's not so much that we're building the tools to support these network societies and pop-up cities, but we're building the tools to support the tools to support these pop-up cities. So what we're building is social media infrastructure, social coordination tools, and social media infrastructure. And I like to clear up this misconception by first promising, really, we're not building another social media application or a protocol. What we're doing is we're really focused on creating shared network effects. So this is a force multiplier on all of the other efforts to decentralize social media. Everybody in this space is working to disintermediate different types of power structures, and we want to support those efforts. It's interoperability all the way down, right? Everybody is working on a different part of this problem, and I'd like to take a few moments to explain what we're doing and how it's in support of everybody else that's building in this space. Would you like to? So my co-founder is a Bosnian war refugee. He was really early to identify the problems that were related, that would come as a result of the first journalists, and I use that term very loosely, being canceled. And realizing that people were being deplatformed, what he started thinking about and proposed to me was a mechanism design to really take into account how we could build a maximally censorship and capture resistant social media infrastructure, something that could bring together all of these different projects and protocols and create a shared network effect. I'm going to describe a bit more what I mean by that, but at a very high level, this is what we're working toward. So you see here, we've got a few different components of this. We're going to go through those sequentially, starting with a portal. Let's take a look at what that is. So a portal, what this is, when most people think of Web3 social media, they assume that we're aggregating things into one feed, right? It's most often something people talk about in terms of like data portability, front-end clients pulling things into different ways to serve content. The issue is that this can lead to loss of control. The creators of these applications, they put a lot of time and effort and care into creating experiences that hopefully the users that are already on those applications, they like them. They want to continue using them in that manner. And if we're trying to incentivize them toward interoperability in a way that disempowers them and takes that control away from each of those applications, they could view that as a downside, right? So what we're focused on instead is allowing users to switch between different social media applications seamlessly. And this is a really simple example of how we're doing that. Imagine just sort of like swiping through Tinder. You're moving between different social media applications, but once you're in an application, you're having a pure experience of each of those applications as the application designers intended. The important thing there is what we're doing is we're aggregating the social graphs underneath it. And with that, we can take a look at the next step of this stack. So you're looking at community graphs here, and I'm going to describe what those are, but by first comparing them to social graphs. So social graphs are the thing that we're defragmenting. We're defragmenting the users across all these social media applications. Users are splintered across hundreds and hundreds of different smaller social media applications, right? If we can bring them together and create this shared network effect, that's a much larger network, and we're creating something that through cooperative competition, you decide on what dimensions are you going to cooperate and on what dimensions are you going to compete. And so it's the network effect that they're going to share, and these other dimensions, they're competing in more of a meritocratic manner, like mobile phone applications are in a mobile phone marketplace, right? Now, in contrast, and in a very complementary manner, we have community graphs. How social graphs map our relationships one-to-one, community graphs map our membership in groups and the extent of our involvement. And let's talk about what that unlocks. We talk about the more meaningful interactions. What is that? It sounds pretty squishy, right? Community stewardship and governance, we're going to get into. Scalable reputation systems has a lot of implications. Let's talk more about those. slide, please. So before we get into that, I'd like to show you what community graphs is and how users interact with it in a way that hopefully illustrates a little bit more what we're talking about. Kate, would you like to take us through that?
Yeah, so we just released our alpha about 2 weeks ago at Zoo Georgia. And so I'm just going to walk you through an experiment that we did there for the first time. So focusing at the beginning, we teamed up with the ZooPass team to allow proof carrying data to let people in. So if you got a ZooPass to the event, then you get to prove it to get access to community graphs. The second screen here just shows once you're in the community graph application, you'll be able to see all of the public communities. And while we were at Zoo Georgia, we were adopted by a furry friend who is named Zuzi G for Zuzi, Georgia. And we teamed up with Lotto PGF, who is doing really awesome work in the space. They realized that lotteries are really successful, so why don't we bring them on chain and use them for public goods? And you can use Lotto PGF to create any kind of fund that you want. So we teamed up with them, created a Suzy G account, and people can go on and donate funds, and then part of the funds, if they end up winning, they keep, and the rest goes to whatever you created it for. So we did that for Zuzi, and then on the community graph side of the collaboration, we set up a community for her. And so in this community, it's representative of a community anyone can go and make. So you get to see the description of the community, you get to link to whether it's a Telegram or any kind of communication messaging service. And then the fun part really is when you get to the attestations. So the main part of community graphs is that we allow people to attest to each other within the community. And what's really important about this is that they're private, so subjective and non-binary. So every single person gets to say, if everyone in this room is a community, we get to say, okay, I know who's organizing this. I know Coco's at the top of the list, and everyone else who just showed up for the talk might be a little lower in the list. And so you get to give people attestations relative to each other. And whenever you do that, what Community Graphs does on the back end is it takes those attestations, it combines them, and then it allows the administrators to apply a function such as quadratic voting to it. Jesse can go more into the details about that, but as we know with quadratic voting, it can mitigate a lot of the issues with traditional vouching systems, with collusion, civil resistance. There's a lot to get into there. But essentially, whenever you give people attestations, and a lot of people give someone a lot of attestations, that the increased number of attestations will lead to higher membership levels. So just to reiterate, you have attestations, and then you can apply a formula if you want, but you don't have to. I'll show you, actually, one sec. Yeah, so you get these membership levels, and the important thing about the membership levels is you can then use those in a number of ways. We're making community graphs to be modular and composable, and so we just wanted to create a simple polling system within community graphs so people could see how these membership levels really work. So on the far right here, you'll see there's a spot to create a poll, and we did a simple one for Zuzi, what should we spend the Lotto PGF fund on? And there's a couple of options, and at the bottom you'll see there's the option to weight the membership levels. So you can put that at 0. And if you put the weighting at 0, then you're just going to have one vote is just one vote. But if you put it up at 100, then that means the vote is going to rely on the membership levels. So the person who, in this case, who took the most care of Zuzi and all the other people in the community voted on that and gave them the most attestations, they get the most voting power, the highest weight of vote in this. So it's a fun way to playfully create instances where you can see how membership levels really work, and they can be applied by communities for a ton of reasons. Governance reasons, they can use it for Sybil resistance, but here for our alpha, we were just getting started with something light and fun.
Yeah, Thanks, Kate. And now let's maybe talk about the reason why we started working on this in the first place, as that is the first best use case. And the inspiration for this ends up being the thing that we are actually building for. So in Istanbul at ZooConnect, there were a lot of conversations around the future of Zuzulu. And as decisions were made to decentralize Zuzulu, and at the same time continue investing in supporting events and a tech stack to support those events, there were a lot of questions around like, well, what is a Zuzulu aligned village? Who gets to use the name Zuzulu? Who's allowed to apply for grant funding? How do you balance inclusivity and exclusivity so that you can satisfy some of the demand that was far outstripping supply, hosting more of these events or hosting larger events or some combination of both of those things? How do you determine who is allowed to come, and how do you determine who to invite into upcoming events without diluting the culture that made that such a special place for all of us to be. So this is our best answer to those questions. And what Kate was referencing in terms of like mitigating for some of the problems of a pure vouching model, those problems, let's talk about them real briefly. Vouching is great in a sense that it gives you some measure of accountability, especially if you're in a group, say on the fringes, the margins of a society, and you have to self-police because you can't ask for help always. So it's important though that in those cases, the interested parties have to know who's doing the vouching, right? Because you have to be accountable for the people that you bring into a space. The issue with that is that it creates weird social pressures that don't always lead to best outcomes. So I might have a friend ask to vouch them into a group of people, and while I know them, I might not really feel like they're the best fit. But because of those social pressures, you end up with people in places that maybe you might not have wanted to bring them. And once that gets started, it becomes a self-reinforcing mechanism, right? Because it's like, we all know the dynamics of like the loudest, most colorful personalities tend to accrue that type of social capital. And then like many things, power collects where more power accumulates where power already exists, right? So kind of like cell division, vouching works like 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, and then a small group of people can wrestle control over a much larger group of people. Not even always maliciously, but that's how culture changes and things can become diluted. We've seen it happen over and over. What this starts to do is mitigate for these problems, though. What community graphs is intended to do, Kate mentioned that the attestations are private. You can have accountability and privacy in this mechanism so that you eliminate that kind of a social pressure. They're private, they're subjective, and this is really important because it means that like each of us determine internally what we value in terms of who is more central to a group. But let's unpack what that even means. What is central to a group? We're not just talking about status for the sake of ranking people, but what we're doing is with this technology, we're really only trying to duplicate some small percentage of what we do naturally in real life in group dynamics that we come to realize really quickly when we enter any group. Who is more central to this group in the sense of like, well, who's putting in a lot of effort? Who started it? Who's been here from the beginning? Who's facilitating it? Who's participating in really meaningful ways? And who's maybe more on the periphery? For the purposes of giving deference to the people's preferences that we determine are more central to a group, right? We do that to more and less degrees and for different reasons, each of us all the time. And this system is really resilient to the different ways that we all do that. And that's actually one of its strengths, because if one of us wants to treat this like a popularity contest, someone else values someone's very visible contributions, and another person might value the quiet contributions that they see in code commits or something else that doesn't normally get so celebrated. The way that each of us determine who contributes to a group in ways that we value differently is actually a substantial strength of this mechanism. And the last thing is that it's non-binary. What that really means is that these attestations are not just like gold stars or merit badges that we give, but you're saying along a continuum how you value people's contributions relative to each other, because that's what really matters. Not just that you're a 62 or a 45, but who is along this continuum more central to a group and who's on the periphery. I hope that explanation adds a little bit more color.
And so we're going to talk about what's next. So just before moving to that slide, you can see under the attestation, we currently started with a design where you had a slider for every individual. And so we already got some really great feedback at Zoo Georgia that has made us reconsider, redesign this. So Jesse's going to talk about what's next for the attestation design.
Yeah, so what we're doing here is we're starting to put people more like on a leaderboard, where instead of pulling these attestations along, where everybody is basically allocating an arbitrary number of points, say like 100 points, distributed proportionally across their attestations. It gets to be very difficult to play with all these sliders simultaneously. So we're exploring alternative UX where you place them on a leaderboard, and this is, again, just an illustrative example in the same way that this poll to determine Lotto PGF funding to figure out how to spend cat food money. These things are very low stakes games that we're looking forward to playing with everybody and building with you, because this is a maximally flexible, composable, modular framework that we want to encourage other people to bring your own math, plug in your own algorithms, build your own front end, and let's figure out how we can leverage these tools to build governance that takes into account stakeholders and participation, so that we're not stuck in this dichotomy between one person, one vote, and one token, one vote. We can mitigate for some of these problems like quadratic funding and quadratic voting does in a context of moving more toward post-token governance.
And that's my favorite part about getting to go to all of these amazing conferences and pop-up cities, is that we get feedback from the most amazing builders and people participating in these communities, and are the people who are actually going to be using these tools. So that moves us on to our next item of being able to make this accessible for the Aleph community.
Yeah, so we've been building with ZooPass and Social Layer and a bunch of different applications that have been supporting the Zuzulu ecosystem and different pop-up cities. We're going to be working with Quark ID here to integrate with their sign-on, so that we can do some really, really interesting things like with this. So at Edge City, we partnered with the Edge folks and ZooPass to do a two-part gating mechanism, where first, by having a ZooPass issued, and then second, by showing up and having your ZooPass scanned, that was how you actually got into the event. That two-part gating mechanism has this interesting implicit benefit, being that we verified proof of uniqueness with that, and that can seed a new web of trust. And with that, we can establish meaningful degrees of social Sybil resistance and collusion resistance, and that's what we were alluding to with the way that we can unlock really robust reputation systems and all kinds of new social coordination tools. So if you'd like to be in touch, this is our a link to our website, and we'd looking forward to building with you and supporting this event. Thanks again for having us.
Thanks, guys.